Hey, Shalom Shalom Mishpocha! Welcome to another edition of Ray Bash's Ramblings. I'm your host, Rabbi Yehudah ben Shomeyr, and today we're going to be talking about the woman who is caught in the very act of adultery in John chapter 8. This passage has puzzled many believers for years, especially Messianic and Netzari believers, and it makes them wonder if this is Yeshua doing away with the law, as opposed to what he said in Matthew chapter 5, that he didn't come to do away with the law. So was he annulling the death penalty for adultery by his actions in this passage? So let me just read to you from a very short blog that I've written. It says, "It is falsely believed by the vast majority of Christendom that the Sanhedrin dished out the death penalty left and right for sins that demand a death penalty, that they were bloodthirsty and eager to use the death penalty. What most Christians do not realize is that in the whole of history of the Sanhedrin, the death penalty was rarely carried out because there had to be 100% proof of guilt of the crime and zero doubt regarding the person's guilt in committing the crime. Even if there was 1% of doubt, the death penalty was not given. There were stringent rules under which the death penalty could be carried out. And this is the very reason Yeshua did not condemn the woman caught in the very act of adultery in John chapter 8. Number one, it was a trap and a setup. So that was kind of obvious right off the bat if you read the narrative of the story. Number two, Yeshua, though he was the Messiah, had no authority to legally condemn anyone to death. Why? Because he didn't sit on the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin sat, the people who were on the Sanhedrin, the rabbis and sages of blessed memory that sat on the Sanhedrin, were given that authority and power to rule. They were sitting in the seat of Moshe to be able to make halakha, to be able to carry out judgments against cases that have been brought to the court of the Sanhedrin. And so, since he was not a member of the Sanhedrin, he had no right to judge this woman, especially to flippantly dish out a death penalty. It was out of his jurisdiction. Though Yeshua himself was a rabbi, it was out of his jurisdiction. If this woman was involved in a kehila or a synagogue in the area, that's who that the men should have brought her to. And then should have brought her to the higher court of the Sanhedrin, because that would be an issue that a synagogue would not be ready or qualified to deal with. Number three, the man who was committing the act with her was not present as the Torah demands for a judgment against an adulterer or adulteress to be carried out. Both parties involved have to be present for the hearing and for the sentencing. Where was the man? How convenient. So many speculate possibly that the man was actually part of this group that was setting Yeshua up to try for a fall, because the man who was caught in the act of adultery, he got away. He wasn't there. He wasn't even mentioned. It was just the woman. But for a sentence to be carried out and passed, the man had to be present as the Torah demands. So Yeshua wasn't extending the Christian version of what they call grace. He ruled that the way that any rabbi in his right mind would rule in that day. Other rabbis may have said, "It's out of my jurisdiction, take it up with the Sanhedrin." The death penalty served as a deterrent for others who may think of committing such sins worthy of the death penalty. The laws regarding punishment and restitution, as it should be under a theocratic monarchy rule of a king via the Torah in the land of Israel. Now today, we accept and obey the government of our exile in these matters, because we are not an autonomous government, an ethnic group within the government of our exile. So notice that there is no mention of a prison or rehabilitation system in the Torah. If guilty, one paid for their crime as the Torah prescribed, or if innocent of, let's say, homicide, they were sent to a place of refuge to protect them from others who would want to hurt or kill them because of their accidental homicide affecting them and their families. So hopefully this gives you a better picture of the narrative in Yochanan chapter 8 regarding the woman caught in the very act of adultery, and also gives you a little bit more insight regarding on why we no longer kill witches, why we no longer stone adulterers, why we don't carry out restitutions for and punishments for crimes committed, because we don't live in Israel, because we don't live under a theocratic rule via the Torah, through a Torah observant government, through a Sanhedrin. We're living in exile, and therefore we are to obey the laws of the land of our exile unless they contradict the Torah. Then we are free from obeying such laws. But the governments of the land of our exiles all have an imperfect system on how to deal with those such crimes, and so we just let them do their thing. It's out of our hands because we don't have a Sanhedrin, and even though we have a Beit Din in our synagogues, we are not authorized or required or qualified to be able to handle such cases involving the death penalty. Basically, the Beit Dins of our local synagogues are equipped and qualified to establish minhag and halakha for our particular congregations, and also to deal with problems that arise within the kihila, disputes like somebody blatantly disobeying Torah, or a dispute between two members, an argument, things of this nature. But things that are of a higher order, that deals with crime and punishment, that falls upon the governments of the lands that we're in. Until Mashiach returns, we're all returned from our exile back to the land of Israel, and the temple is rebuilt, and the Sanhedrin is reestablished, and Mashiach reigns. Then those laws that have been temporarily suspended and put on a shelf can be taken down, and they can be used again, because they are put back within their proper place and context as it was meant when the Torah was given. So thanks for watching. Shalom and Shavua Tov. Bye-bye.